The Mecklenburg County election debates are a service of WTVI, Mecklenburg County, and the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg. The views and opinions expressed in these debates are those of the candidates and do not necessarily represent the views of WTVI, its management, Mecklenburg County, or the League of Women Voters.
PBS Charlotte and the League of Women Voters present Election Debate 2016.
Hello, I'm Jason Terzis with PBS Charlotte. Welcome to the 2016 general election debate sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg. During the next 15 minutes, you will hear from the candidates in the North Carolina Court of Appeals race. Questions for today's debate were provided by the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg. The candidates were not given the questions ahead of time. I will call on candidates in random order, and they will have then either 30 seconds or 1 minute to respond. If you would like to challenge an opponent, raise your yellow challenge card. You will then have 30 seconds to respond. Each candidate has 3 challenges during this debate, and you will then be allowed to make a 30-second closing statement. Now, let's meet the 2 candidates in the North Carolina Court of Appeals race. We have with us today Mr. Bob Hunter and Mr. Abe Jones. Gentlemen, thank you for coming today. Our first question: when the public financing of statewide judges was repealed in 2013, what impact did that have on judicial races? We have 30 seconds to answer this one. Mr. Jones, we'll begin with you.
Thank you. I think the impact is very detrimental. I don't think judicial races should be thrown into the political forum the way we have to do now. It was well done before because both candidates could get some matching funds, and now judges have to go out and seek their money just like the other non-judicial candidates. I don't think it's a good deal for the North Carolina people.
All right, Mr. Hunter.
Well, I think that the system that I was first elected in, I got to use public funds, and I've been in 2 races where I haven't gotten to use public funds, and I agree with Mr. Jones that it was a detrimental decision so far as the judges were concerned because it impairs our judicial independence to ask people for money. Now, I think most of the candidates, or I'll say all the candidates, can raise money without compromising their judicial ethics, but it does make it difficult.
All right. Are you in favor of reinstating the public financing of statewide judges, yes or no? In 30 seconds, Mr. Hunter.
Yes.
We'll keep it as simple as that. Okay, Mr. Jones.
Yes.
Okay. We'll keep it simple. We'll check them both off. All right, next question. What is your experience in the areas of criminal law, family law, complex civil litigation? 60 seconds for this one, Mr. Jones.
Well, I have experience in all 3 of those areas, particularly the criminal law and complex litigation. Having been a prosecutor, defense attorney, and a judge, I believe that the criminal law needs some work in terms of some of the, there's some problems in it. The bail bond system, I think, needs some serious review, and access to having hearings in a ready way needs some work. Complex litigation is always, it's necessary to have more lawyers than one, or at least some paralegals. And family law, that's driven primarily in many instances by emotion. I don't think it needs a lot of work, but I think to the extent that big systems separate it and get judges who've had experience in it is a good idea, and that should be spread across the state the best we can.
Okay, Mr. Hunter, your experience in the areas of criminal law, family law, and complex civil litigation.
Well, for the past 8 years, I have written about 120 opinions a year in each one of those fields, total. And so I have a great deal of experience, and for the past 8 years, writing judicial opinions for the Court of Appeals in each one of those. And prior to that time, for 35 years, I practiced law at large firms and small firms in North Carolina. I've had complex litigation. I've had 5 cases in the U.S. Supreme Court, and I've done a lot of work over that period of time. I was an arbitrator. I did securities litigation. So I've done a wide swath of anything that came in the door. And so I'm well experienced for the job.
All right. What forms of voluntary, professional, and community service have you been involved with in the past and are currently involved in? 30 seconds for this one, Mr. Hunter.
I'm currently on the and former president of North Carolina Bar Cares, which is a nonprofit organization dealing with the psychological and mental health of lawyers and their families. I've served as president of that organization, and I'm currently vice chairman of a commission, the North Carolina Commission on Racial and Ethnic Disparities in the Criminal Justice System, which is looking into why so many African American citizens in North Carolina are imprisoned.
Mr. Jones.
I am currently the chairman of the Library Commission in my county, which is Wake County. Prior to that, I've served on the Mental Health Board. I also have engaged in Big Brother program where I adopted usually a young man to mentor, and I've done that working through my church and through my fraternity. And also I occasionally try to go out and see people in nursing homes just to visit people who are ill and don't have other people who will come see them.
Okay. North Carolina is the only state that sets the age of adulthood in criminal court at 16. Should the age be raised to 18? What impact would that have on administering juvenile justice? Mr. Jones, 30 seconds.
I think it should be raised because more and more young people are getting into trouble, and it would have an impact because you can move on and when you become a so-called adult, and that juvenile record is sort of taken away from you. And so the younger you can make the mistake that's permanent is bad. So those 2 years between 16 and 18, I think it would be helpful given some of the kinds of things our young people have gotten into during this time.
Mr. Hunter.
I'm on the commission, as I spoke earlier, on racial and ethnic disparities. We have recommended on the commission that the age be raised to 18. Judge Trosh from here in Mecklenburg County is on that commission, and he cautions us that if we do raise the age, it's going to require a lot more resources from the public to help to provide the services for juveniles. And there's a big question if we do raise the age, we have to have the funds necessary to help these minors get the sort of resources they have to have that other juveniles have.
Okay, the judicial system is currently addressing implicit bias in the juvenile justice system. What practices or procedures are needed to address this issue throughout the court system? 30 seconds for this one, Mr. Hunter.
Well, I have taken the racial equity or fairness training from the Z. Smith Reynolds Foundation. It didn't do me any harm. I hope it did me some good. And I would recommend it to people who are curious about this subject and would like to help themselves. A lot of mandatory training is required of our police and other folks, and I think it's a useful tool to try to combat any systematic racism that may exist in our system and may cause people to think a little bit more about that.
Mr. Jones.
Well, I think the attitudes of society certainly transferred into the judicial system and policing and so forth, and we have to accept that. And I think training such as what Judge Hunter mentioned is good for all of us, the judges, the prosecutors, defense attorneys, and I think the bar associations should encourage that, and it should be done. I think it should be mandatory for judges and police and prosecutors because it's important, and you run into it time and time again.
All right, what do you perceive as the greatest obstacles to justice? 60 seconds for this one, Mr. Jones.
Well, the greatest obstacle that I have encountered, people just can't afford to get the good attorneys, and a lot of the good attorneys won't volunteer for the list. And I try to do as much pro bono work as I can do, but you can't afford to do so much and have a practice. So I think that's the greatest obstacle. If you have good representation, the system itself is fairly equitable in most instances, but it's the kind of things that attorneys will press for that the system depends on the attorney representing the person well, that where the weakness is.
Mr. Hunter.
I think the biggest challenge to justice in our state is the money. Costs have been recently increased by the legislature to help pay for court services. And I think that's a problem. I think the average North Carolina citizen working a minimum wage or a living wage can't really afford access to justice in the civil system. I think you see a lot of people that can't be served by legal aid because our resources for that organization are not adequate. So I think that a lot of these problems can be solved by money or alternative dispute resolutions, and a number of innovative and creative things that I know that the Charlotte courts and justice initiatives here in Charlotte are doing for people locally.
All right. Should the court system provide a place where the public can easily access searchable case results and sentencing decisions? 30 seconds for this one, Mr. Hunter.
Yes, you can go to northcarolinacourts.org and get a lot of forms, and you can read the cases. It's not as easy to navigate as everybody would like, but it's there. And we report our cases publicly every time we have a drop date. And so you can go and read those cases, and you can get access to all the forms at nccourts.org. And it takes you a little while to learn how to navigate it, and maybe it could be made more accessible, but it is available to the public now. And I certainly think we're seeing the rise of a lot of pro se litigation, so that can help them.
Mr. Jones.
Well, just to dovetail what Judge Hunter said, I think that what I would add is that we need to publicize that nc.org is there and make it available. Perhaps have a room in each courthouse where people can access the computer to get on that and get that information. It's the lack of knowing what's available that's hurting the public, not that it's not available.
All right, time now for closing statements. 30 seconds, Mr. Jones.
It's been a privilege to come. As I said before, my name is Abe Jones. I've been a prosecutor, defense attorney, and a judge. I practiced for 39 years. I went to Harvard College, Harvard undergrad. I was a law clerk. I was an assistant U.S. attorney and a Superior Court judge for 17 years in Wake County. I believe I would bring a particular lens to the Court of Appeals. They have 15 judges, and I think that someone who had my experience could add much. Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Hunter.
I'm Judge Bob Hunter. For the past 8 years, I've been a judge on the North Carolina Court of Appeals and have written hundreds of decisions that affect the lives of North Carolinians. I'm a fair person. I'm well experienced for this job. I'm respected by my colleagues, and as you might have suggested by the answers to these questions, I'm an independent cuss. Now, I don't know if you've noticed that sometimes the legislature messes up, and they need judicial supervision, and I'm the right person for that job. I would appreciate your vote in November.
All right, once again, our thanks to Bob Hunter and Abe Jones, candidates in the North Carolina Court of Appeals race, for taking part in this debate. For more information about the League of Women Voters of Charlotte-Mecklenburg, go to goleaguego.org. And for more information on the candidates, go to vote411.org. A reminder for Mecklenburg County voters, early voting begins on Thursday, October 20th. The general election is Tuesday, November 8th. Election day polls will be open from 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. I'm Jason Terzis. Thank you for watching PBS Charlotte.